It was 2 a.m., and I was working the front desk at a small, independently owned hotel on the outskirts of town. The kind of place with faded carpets, a perpetually flickering neon sign, and a lingering scent of stale coffee and desperation. Most nights were uneventful, a blur of checking in late arrivals, answering the occasional complaint about thin walls, and a lot of staring at the clock. This particular night, however, started differently. The snow had begun to fall around midnight, a gentle flutter at first, then escalating into a relentless blizzard. By 1 a.m., the roads were practically impassable, and the world outside was a swirling vortex of white. It was the kind of night where you expected no one to be out, no one to be moving. Around 1:45 a.m., the bell above the main door chimed, a surprisingly cheerful sound given the apocalyptic conditions. I looked up, expecting a stranded traveler seeking refuge. Instead, a figure emerged from the whiteout, tall, cloaked in a heavy, dark overcoat, and with a hat pulled low over their face, obscuring all but a glimpse of a pale chin. They carried no luggage, only a small, nondescript duffel bag. "Room for the night." The voice was low, gravelly, almost a whisper, yet it carried an unsettling resonance in the silent lobby. I found myself instinctively shrinking back a little. It wasn't the voice itself, but the absence of something in it. No emotion, no fatigue from battling the storm, just flat. "Yes, we have vacancies," I managed, my voice a little higher than I intended. "Just need you to fill out some details." The figure approached the desk, the hat still shielding their face. They filled out the registration card with a surprising grace, their hand moving with an almost mechanical precision. I glanced at the name, Mr. Thorne, and for the address, simply out of town. No city, no state, just out of town. My internal alarm bells began to clang softly. It wasn't entirely unusual for guests to be vague, especially in bad weather. Sometimes people just wanted to disappear for a night, but something about Mr. Thorne felt different. His eyes, when he briefly lifted his head to hand me the card, were an unnerving shade of light, almost translucent, set deep in a gaunt face. They held no warmth, no flicker of life, only a depthless void. I handed him the key card to room 212 on the second floor. "Breakfast is from 7 to 9 a.m., I recited, the usual spiel. He simply nodded, took the key, and without another word, turned and walked towards the elevator. His footsteps made almost no sound on the carpet. The lobby was silent once more, but the silence felt heavier now, charged with an unspoken tension. I tried to shake off the unease, telling myself it was just the late hour, the isolation, the sheer weirdness of the blizzard. But the image of those eyes, those empty, hollow eyes, kept replaying in my mind. The next hour passed slowly. The storm intensified, rattling the old windows. I made myself a fresh pot of coffee, the aroma doing little to dispel the chill that had settled in my bones. I scrolled through news headlines on my phone, half listening to the wind howl. Around 3:30 a.m., the first call came. The phone at the front desk rang, a jarring sound in the quiet. I answered, expecting a complaint from a guest. "Front desk, Alex speaking." There's someone watching me." My blood ran cold. "Who is this? What room are you in?" More frantic. "Room 209. He's at the window, just staring." Room 209. That was 2 doors down from Mr. Thorne's 212. A cold dread began to coil in my stomach. "Okay, sir, please stay calm. I'm coming up. Do not open your door for anyone." My hands were shaking as I grabbed the master key card. Every instinct screamed at me to call the police. But what would I tell them? Someone is looking into someone else's window in the blizzard? It sounded ridiculous even to me. I had to investigate first. The elevator ride up felt like an eternity. Each floor dinged, echoing in the cavernous shaft. When the doors opened on the second floor, the corridor was dim, bathed in the sickly yellow glow of emergency lights.
The silence here was even more profound than in the lobby, a suffocating blanket. I walked cautiously towards room 209, my heart pounding against my ribs. I reached the door, paused, and knocked softly. "Sir, it's Alex from the front desk." No answer. I knocked again, a little louder. Still nothing. A chilling thought began to form in my mind. What if he wasn't just looking? I hesitated for a moment. Then, using the master key card, I slowly, carefully opened the door to room 209. The room was dark. The curtains were drawn, just like in room 209. But there was a difference. A faint, almost invisible metallic tang hung in the air, a scent that prickled the back of my throat, and a profound icy cold that radiated from within the room, defying the hotel's heating. I pushed the door open a little wider, just enough to see inside. The bed was neatly made, undisturbed. The small table by the window was empty. Nothing seemed out of place. No Mr. Thorne. Then I saw it. On the pristine white bedspread, a single dark stain. It was small, no bigger than a quarter, but its color was an unsettling reddish-brown, stark against the white, and it was still wet. My breath hitched. This wasn't coffee, this wasn't wine, this was blood, and it was fresh. I darted my eyes around the room, frantically searching for the source, and then I saw them. Faint, almost invisible, but undeniably there. Drag marks, starting from the bed, leading towards the bathroom.
Every fiber of my being screamed at me to run, to get out, to call for help. But a morbid curiosity, a horrifying fascination compelled me forward. I had to know. I had to see. I pushed open the bathroom door. The small room was even darker than the bedroom, and the metallic tang in the air was overwhelming now, choking, acrid. My eyes struggled to adjust, and then I saw it. The bathtub. It was full of a dark, murky liquid that shimmered faintly in the scant light, and in the center of the tub, floating eerily, was a human head. I screamed, a primal, guttural sound that tore from my throat, raw and desperate. I stumbled backward, tripping over my own feet, crashing to the floor. My mind reeled, unable to process the horror. But the horror wasn't over. As I lay there, gasping for air, my eyes still fixed on the nightmare in the tub, the light from the corridor caught something else. On the wall, above the sink, scrawled in what could only be blood, was a single word: Watcher. The word seemed to pulsate, to leer at me from the wall. And then, a sound. A faint scraping. A subtle movement from behind me. I froze, every muscle in my body locking up. Slowly, agonizingly, I turned my head, and there, standing in the doorway, framed by the dim light of the bedroom, was Mr. Thorne. He wasn't wearing his hat now. His face was pale, almost translucent, etched with a chillingly serene expression. His light eyes, those depthless voids, were fixed on me, unblinking, and in his hand he held a long, gleaming knife. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. My voice was gone, strangled by terror. He took a slow, deliberate step into the bathroom. Then another. The knife gleamed, reflecting the dim light like a malevolent eye. I scrabbled backward, trying to push myself away, but my limbs felt like lead. He was almost on me. His eyes held no malice, no anger, only that terrifying, detached emptiness. It was the gaze of a predator, observing its prey. Just as he raised the knife, a loud, insistent knocking erupted from the front door of the hotel, echoing through the building. The sound was jarring, unexpected, a sudden intrusion into the nightmare. Mr. Thorne paused, his head cocked slightly, listening. The knocking came again, louder this time, accompanied by a muffled shout. For a split second, his gaze flickered away from me towards the sound. That was all I needed. With a burst of adrenaline I didn't know I possessed, I scrambled to my feet, bursting past him, out of the bathroom, through the bedroom, and into the corridor. I didn't look back. I just ran. I pounded down the stairs, ignoring the elevator. My legs burned, my lungs ached, but the image of that face, that knife, the horror in the bathtub fueled my desperate flight. I burst into the lobby, panting, wild-eyed, and saw 2 police officers standing by the front desk, their faces etched with concern. The knocking had been them. The blizzard had finally eased enough for them to respond to my call. "Upstairs," I choked out, pointing a trembling finger towards the 2nd floor. "Room 212. He's got a body." The officers, seeing my genuine terror and frantic state, immediately drew their weapons and headed for the stairs. I stumbled back, collapsing into a chair, trying to catch my breath, trying to make sense of the nightmare I had just lived. Minutes later they returned. Their faces were grim. One officer held a small, clear evidence bag. Inside was a long, gleaming knife. "There was no one in room 212, one of them said, his voice flat. The room was empty. No trace of anyone. And no body. My blood ran cold again. But the head, the blood, the word on the wall, I cried, my voice rising in a desperate plea for them to believe me. They had checked the bathroom. The bathtub was sparkling clean, completely empty. No bloodstain on the bed, no word on the wall. It was as if it had all been a hallucination, a terrible, vivid dream. I insisted, I pleaded, I described Mr. Thorne in vivid detail, the aloe eyes, the serene expression. They listened patiently, professionally, but their gazes held a hint of skepticism, a subtle pity. The only thing they found was the knife, tucked away behind the toilet tank in the bathroom, wrapped in a single dark cloth. And the guest from room 209, he had been found wandering aimlessly in the 3rd floor corridor, still disoriented and mumbling about the Watcher. They took my statement, questioned the other guest, and after a thorough search of the entire hotel, found absolutely no other evidence to corroborate my story. No fingerprints, no sign of forced entry or struggle in room 212, nothing. The official report concluded that I likely experienced a stress-induced hallucination brought on by the isolation of the night shift, the blizzard, and the distressed guest. The knife was classified as found property, with no clear connection to any crime. But I know what I saw. I know what I felt. The terror was too real, the details too vivid, the metallic smell too distinct. Mr. Thorne was real. The head in the bathtub was real. The word on the wall in room 212 was real. I never worked another night shift after that. The thought of being alone in the dark, vulnerable, with the memory of those empty eyes, that serene face, the gleam of the knife, it was too much. Sometimes, when the night is particularly still, or when the wind howls outside, I still feel it, that cold dread, that sense of being watched. I check the locks, I pull the curtains tight. I convince myself it was just a hallucination, a trick of the mind. But then I remember the knife, the one piece of tangible evidence that didn't just vanish, the one thing that proved I wasn't entirely crazy. And I remember the phrase from the guest in room 209. He's not outside. He's in the room across, looking in, with those awful eyes. And the word on the wall in room 212, Watcher. I don't work nights anymore, but sometimes I wonder, was Mr. Thorne a man or something else? Something drawn to the quiet vulnerability of the night, something that enjoys playing with fear. And what happened to the person's head in that tub if it wasn't a hallucination? I don't know, and I never want to find out.